here. So greetings, everyone who's joining us on Facebook and Zoom. Welcome to a Q&A with the director and cinematographer, a surprise guest appearance of the film The Nature Makers. My name is Ginevra. I'm the program coordinator at Sustainable Woodstock. We're a nonprofit organization founded in 2009. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and empower everyone to live environmentally, economically, and socially responsible lives. So a quick kind of blurb about our climate change and sustainability film series. This film is part of the series. We have monthly films through Sustainable Woodstock, us, and Pentangle Arts. So there are monthly free screenings of films and documentaries focused on climate change and sustainability. We do this as a way to foster a broader awareness of issues impacting our planet and our future. So our next film will be The River and the Wall. That's going to be for October. And it follows 5 friends on an adventure through the unknown wilds of the Texas borderlands as they travel from El Paso to the Gulf of Mexico on horses, mountain bikes, and canoes. So that's October 25th to 29th. You can stream that. Before we get started for tonight, just really wanted to quickly run through how things will operate. We're recording this and we'll send it out afterwards for anyone who missed it. And we're also on Facebook Live. You are currently muted. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat box on the side of the Zoom screen as we go here. If you scroll over, a little chat bubble will appear. You can click on it and type your question in there. And you can type it in the comments section on Facebook. So I think that's really it for technicalities. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our two guests. So the first is Scott Saunders, who has directed 4 feature films and over 20 shorts. His 3rd feature, The Technical Writer, premiered in competition at Sundance. He was one of Variety's 10 digital video directors to watch. He's the recipient of a Creative Capital Foundation grant and the Someone to Watch Award at the Independent Spirit Awards. The Nature Makers is his first documentary. And we also have Oktay Ortabasi, who is the cinematographer for Nature Makers. And I don't have a bio on, so you'll have to introduce yourself. But yeah, I'm excited to hear a bit more about film from both of you.
Okay, should I just start? I'll just start talking.
Yeah.
And Oktay, feel free to jump in at any time. This is I'm pointing to Oktay's little picture on the screen now.
I'm here.
Very talented cinematographer of the film. So I'm really happy that this film is part of a climate change and sustainability series, because when we started out making the film at the beginning, it was, we were thinking of it as a climate change film. And over time and through the research we were doing, it transformed itself, and we transformed it into a kind of wildlife and sustainability film, a wildlife conservation film. But we always had climate change in mind. When we were shooting, I was always thinking about this story and what was happening in front of the camera is happening in the shadow of climate change. So I'm really happy that we're part of a climate change series. So what the film is about wildlife conservation, but more specifically, what we were thinking about when we were making the film was that human impacts on natural systems are so enormous these days that it takes incredible effort to keep a lot of natural ecosystems from collapsing. And so the film documents the work of a lot of really kind of heroic and hardworking conservationists. And the reason we wanted to do that was because so much environmental damage is in absence. You know, if a beaver doesn't show up anymore, it's hard to film that. If a bird doesn't come to a field anymore, it's hard to film that. But you can actually make quite a dramatic film out of people doing really intense, passionate work. but we didn't think of this as kind of a traditional, straightforward wildlife conservation film, and it differs from those films in a number of ways. The first way and the most visible way, excuse me, I'm going to have a sip of water here. It is 1 a.m. here, so please excuse me. The first way it differs is that in most wildlife films, they work really hard to frame out all signs of human activity. So, sometimes when you'll see a scene that looks like it's happening in the pristine wilderness, if the camera were to just frame a little bit to the left, you might see a house or a highway or a factory or something like this, where Oktay and I decided right from the beginning that what we would do is we would always leave those things in the frame. So in the background of frames, you might see a coal-fired power plant or a house or a barn or a silo or Interstate 80. And actually that for me, that was harder than you might think, because my instinct was always to try to frame the human element out, but I had to keep reminding myself, keep putting the human items in, because natural, basically the natural setting for a lot of these species now is not this pristine wilderness, but it is a human world. It's a world where there are cornfields and there are factories and there are roads. The second idea that we were working with was that I really wanted to show the work that people were doing. I've lived most of my life in cities. I lived in New York for 25 years. And so for me, wildlife was, pigeons and squirrels. So I didn't know what to expect when we would get out into Nebraska or into Colorado or into North Dakota. And so I was really thinking of this as a story of specifically of the work that humans were doing. But once we began to film with the wildlife, my idea of what the film would be was utterly transformed when I think that happened the first day of shooting, when Oktay and I were filming with the cranes in a bird blind in Nebraska. It was just the most, I guess, awe-inspiring experience. I mean, really, it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life to be returning to the river. Go ahead, Oktay.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point. And I think this is true for almost every human. We're so detached from the natural world. It shouldn't have been amazing for Scott and I to be out amongst the birds. That should have been a natural thing that we do all the time. But we were so inspired and awestruck by that because we're siloed. We live in these kind of square boxes away from all this nature. So that's sort of like a sad thing, I think, that we all lack a huge connection with the natural world. And that's why a lot of people don't think it's important. If you don't see it around you, why would it be important?
Yeah, good point. So one of the things that became really apparent while we were filming was that especially the cranes and the prairie dogs, they were so charismatic to be around, with the prairie dogs with their language and their behaviors with each other, and the cranes with their dancing and their gossiping and their stretching their wings in the morning sun. That we really had a sense of why these wildlife conservationists were doing the incredibly hard work that they were doing. And it became really clear to me why that had to be an important part of the story. So that gives you a bit of a sense of the changing nature of the film. So I guess, Oktay, unless you want to add anything, we can throw it open to questions.
Well, what I think is important, though, you talk about the changing nature of the film because we didn't focus completely on climate change, but all these things are completely related. That's another human trait. Like everything's divided, everything's this element and a separate, we categorize everything. All these things go together, appreciation of the natural world, all these species and their interactions, they are related to climate change, and so again, I think that what's good about being in this particular showing is that it is part of climate change, right? That the more you lose these species, whether they be animals, plants, trees, entire habitats, that's affecting climate change, right? It's all part of it. I made everyone silent with that statement. But yeah, let's do questions. Okay. We can babble on forever.
Questions are way more fun than listening to me drone on at 1 a.m. here in the Czech Republic.
Can we see the people who saw the film? Is there anybody out there?
People can type in the chat if they saw it.
They're so silenced. Type away.
Yeah, type away if folks saw the film. I know I did, and our director Michael, who's on here, did as well. So folks can put questions in the chat, and while people are thinking, I'm happy to get started because I'm a questions person. But I actually have like a very basic one that I thought it might be helpful for folks to hear. Was you talked about how you started kind of maybe making one sort of film and transition to another, but I'm just curious how you both got to kind of Middle America and how you chose the species you chose, just like the very basic questions of how you got where you got to make that film.
No, those are great questions. But the Middle America part was, we could have made a film that took place all over the world to kind of show the global nature of these problems. But what we really wanted to do was focus on the United States, because it was important to us that people not say, oh, that's just some exotic thing happening in India or in Africa. It doesn't really affect us. By setting all of the stories in the United States specifically, we really hope to drive home the fact that this is happening here. This is happening around all of us. So it was a very conscious choice to have all of the stories here. Specifically, kind of in heartland America, right in the middle of the country. And
Scott, the statements that got us was when somebody described the area where the cranes live in Nebraska. He said the Platte River used to be 1 mile wide and 1 inch deep. You know how wide it is today? What, 60 feet? Well, we saw it at its maximum. So, it's this destruction of these epic landscapes where the buffalo roamed. I got to film 3 buffalo there that they were breeding and trying to resuscitate. So when you hear stuff like that, you're like, of course you've got to film there. These guys are preserving a bird migration that's millions of years old. Scott, am I misquoting?
Yeah.
That's
the bird has evolved a little bit, but yes, this migration has been happening in some form for 1 million years.
Yeah, you add one more dam and one more diversion to a cornfield that's going to make ethanol or something, and that's gone. 1 million years of migration is gone. So I think that's worth making a film about.
And the question about how we ended up with these 3 species, we didn't pick these stories for the species. We picked them really for the work that the humans were doing. We were really interested in the fact that the Platte River in Nebraska has been so dammed and diverted and changed and impacted by human development that it no longer functions as a natural river. So to make the river function to imitate forces that we have stopped. Humans go out in the river with giant earth-moving equipment and imitate the spring floods as a way of preserving habitat for prairie adapted species. So they're using what seems like, the ultimate human tool, doing something that looks pretty destructive, but in fact, it's imitating a natural force with a human tool. So all three stories were really selected with that in mind. The story in the Grand Canyon was picked because, the idea of flying fish around the Grand Canyon with helicopters seemed like it was a little bit crazy, but it spoke to the fact that that's how bad the problem is now. And these are the kinds of interventions required. Anything to add to that, Oktay?
Yeah, I mean, I think you told me early on, it's like, I want to see, technology and, huge human intervention. It's like, these things won't continue to happen, with the fish in the Grand Canyon. They were all poisoned out of there to put sports fish in. So the natural fish didn't exist. And it sounded so crazy actually to us, because I was there doing another film and talked to our contact in the Grand Canyon and said, oh yeah, well, they do helicopter these fish. And I said, wait, reverse what? Helicoptering fish? And that's what they do. If you've been to the Grand Canyon, you know how hard it is to, walk down there. Imagine you're putting one of those barrels on your back and, doing a 12-mile hike. It's impossible. So you got to do it with a helicopter, but that's only because we eradicated the natural fish. It's just crazy, Sorry.
I thank you both. I love that point of it being like about the people, or choosing it for the people's actions, what the lengths they're going to. That's pretty neat. I wanted to just read here. Jess wrote, I love the movie. Thank you for sharing. I learned a lot. Someone else hasn't seen it yet, but they're looking forward to it. So this is a fun little teaser for folks who are on here who haven't seen it. We have a question here. What are some of the themes that you experienced during filming and production that transcend any particular geographical location or political entity?
Wow,
Bugs will eat you anywhere.
Say that again, Oktay?
The universal theme is bugs will eat you anywhere you are. They will attack you. Whether it be a mosquito, what were those devil flies or whatever in Nebraska? Those are awful. Anyway.
Yeah.
As just
for me, it was the sun in South Dakota.
And you know what you know what the universal theme is really, and it's about these people. None of them think they're heroes. None of them seek the limelight or do anything like that. They only care about the natural world, and some sort of have a personal connection with their family. Like they say, if I don't save these species or help this population, what are my kids going to have in the future? A lot of them kind of brought up those ideas, but none of them think of themselves as any kinds of heroes, although we do. So they're very humble, down to earth people, and they just use very practical means to solve these things. No, they don't, they're not, I'm sure they have these sort of bigger world thoughts, but they're all just about the practical. Like, do we have enough shovels to do this? Can we get down there in time before the barrel heats up? It's all practical, down to earth logistics. I think that's what we were dealing with every day. And that's how they make it happen.
No, that's 100% right about the way they work. Absolutely. And the fact that, we made so many friends was a great part of the experience for me. But okay, themes. So I think there were really two overriding themes that I tried to keep in mind as we were working throughout the film. The first one the idea that, technology is something that is putting so much pressure on natural systems. Technology in the form of, our industrial systems, our cultural systems. It's putting extreme pressure on natural systems. So can technology also be used as a way to try to alleviate some of the problems it itself has caused, or is technology the enemy? And the other similar question is, if it takes so much hard work to preserve these species, is it really worth the trouble to do it? Should we maybe consider using our resources to do something else, maybe to protect people rather than to protect wildlife? Now, I think the film answers those questions, but I think those questions are more than just philosophical questions, because how you answer those questions really determines a lot of public policy. It determines wildlife conservation policy. And so I think those questions are really important to deal with, as we think about how we are going to coexist with, with wildlife and wild species.
I mean, I think we ultimately came up with the thought that technology is the answer for a lot of these things in the way the world is, right? None of us here in our little environments, we're not going to just knock these walls down and sit in a hut out in the forest. You want heat, you want light, you want electricity, you want to get on your Zoom stuff. Nobody's going to get, let go of those things. We're not going to have a mass exodus where people become nomadic living off the land, right? So you need technology to make our lives more efficient, make our lives have less impact on the natural environment, and then use these technologies to figure out how we can maintain species and maintain the world in a better way. I think that's sort of, we've funneled ourselves into having to find a technological solution. Other than
which is frightening, because the technology can go very, very, very wrong. But in many cases, these technological solutions seem to be the best shot wild nature has, which is a little bit crazy and befuddling, but that's kind of what it's come down to in many places. The other point I'll make about that, though, is that, one of the key images from the film, and hopefully this isn't too spoilerish, but one of the key images is when the giant Kershaw tree smasher gets caught in the mud, because that's, we didn't know that was going to happen, but when the whole story, because at the end of the day, nature is more powerful, and it will decide how things go. So whatever we do, we always have to keep that in mind. We always have to shape all of our activities to those forces of nature, which will have their way with us if we're not careful.
I was thinking of that exact scene while you were talking about technology before, because it is so shocking to watch, and it feels almost wrong to even watch it cutting down trees beforehand. And the people kind of acknowledge that, and it's just so intense and interesting to think about. Yeah, I want to make sure I get people in here. Judy said she loved the film, especially the parts showing volunteers' extraordinary efforts, like operating those crazy augers and reaching deep into the earth, and also the beautiful slow-mos of the cranes in flight. So that gorgeous scenery. So thank you for showing this great film. I agree with all of that. And then Marie asks, did you discover any coping strategies the conservationists are using to stay positive and keep them from becoming discouraged with everything they see happening?
That's a fantastic question, actually, because it is the work is brutally hard and it's really thankless, and they could be paid so much more if they did a sort of non-conservation oriented job. And you know, a few of the people in the film have already left. We didn't finish filming all that long ago, and they've already left conservation because it just became too much for them. But I think people take great solace in knowing that they are actually making an enormous difference. I mean, one prairie dog action can save quite literally hundreds of lives. So, you know, that's they're racking up some serious karmic points there by doing that work. So I think that really is sort of, in a lot of ways, its own reward. So Oktay, do you have anything?
I do think they go day by day, and they value the wins they have. You know, like, oh, we cleared, you know, the trees out, and now we've got a few more birds coming in this year, or we've saved this many prairie dogs, or, you know, the fish migrate, the fish population has maintained over 2 years or 3 years, and we see baby fish. So they definitely, the wins are something that keeps them going. But a lot of them had this attitude that they hoped that over time humanity would adjust and live more sustainably, and that they were sort of the keepers of these species, you know. So they were, a lot of them thought, you know, if I can get this species down the road just a little bit longer, at least for my lifetime, that as the world changes and becomes a more sustainable place, that I've managed to help this species survive. I heard that from a few of them, Scott. I don't know if you want to, you know.
No, that's
like,
that's
you know,
well said.
Yeah. And
Great.
Another question there.
I just, somebody mentioned the cinematography of the cranes. So I just want to address that, because that's something that comes up quite a lot after screenings. People regularly ask how we flew the drone so close to the cranes while the cranes were flying. And in fact, we didn't have any drones while the cranes were there, because you couldn't do anything like that to disturb the cranes. So everything had to be done with an extremely long lens. And Oktay was working with a lens on the camera that was, you know, let's see, I can't even really get it in the
it was
frame.
an 800 millimeter lens. It was, you know, close to 3 feet long. But the problem was, we were stuck in a bird blind. I don't know, you know, probably your viewers know what these things are, but they're these little boxes they build out in the field, and they cut a slit in there. But okay, that's hard enough. So you have an 800 millimeter lens, 2 grown men in there with cameras going like this. But wait, you can't go out there and go film. You have to go during the afternoon when the birds are out in the field having their dinner. You go into the blind and lock yourself in there and don't come out all night till the morning. So we sat in there all night, and there was a